Hello, I'm Natalie Kunsman, MD, and today's program needs to be shared with anybody who has attempted a diet. And why do I say that? Well, no diet in the world is going to work for you if you have food intolerances and food that cannot be tolerated that is on the list for that particular diet. So I like to think of dietary food issues that are good or bad for you in several different categories. So I'm going to walk you through it the way I would walk through it with a patient. So the very first round of foods that need to be ruled in or ruled out in your diet are those that are absolutely the catastrophic food allergies. Now, those are the type that could actually kill you if you've ingested them. So those types of tests or those types of food are not necessarily tested by you taking in some ingestion or doing some allergy testing. This is actually done at the blood work level. So there is a mixture of foods in certain categories mixed with your particular blood that gets essentially mixed up in the blood workup, and it will measure IgE, which is a type of antibody made from the B cells that will be produced if the body views that food as a toxic substance. So those are the ones that need to be ruled out because those are the ones that can cause anaphylaxis and absolute shock and death. So the next round of peeling the onion at a deeper layer as far as food intolerances are literally the food intolerances governed by the immune system that may be anywhere from 24 to 72 hours after ingestion. And that's with the immune system using the T cells and some IgG and later or subsequent food intolerances potentially at the immune layer at the gut border to determine whether or not those foods are tolerated or not. So there are very wonderfully eloquent testing panels that can test anywhere from 40 to 250 substances, and there are specialty labs designed to help work with that. And again, most of that is also in the form of blood work, and it will look at the trickle-down effect of the T cell shrinkage or T cell production or the IgG production against some of those food substances. So there is Cyrex, there is Cell Science Systems, there's Genova Diagnostics, and all of those are quite reputable labs that I will send people on a deeper dive for those tests. Now, as a sidebar, today's topic is food, but in some of those panels, they can actually measure any medication intolerances, over-the-counter medication intolerances, and if there are food dyes, food additives, and such that can cause some of the food intolerances. So we have IgE, we have the immediate life-threatening food allergies, we have the delayed food allergies that the immune system is looking at. And then we start talking about some of the substances within food that may not be tolerated. One of the common ones that I see would, for instance, be nut intolerance. And then this is outside of whether or not there is a true allergy to it. So a lot of nuts have phytates in them, or shall we say phytic acid, and that is within the nut to protect it from the elements to allow it to be a seedling in the future. But that in higher doses of that can disrupt some of the digestive enzymes that are needed. It can actually disrupt some of the absorption of calcium, phosphorus, and some of our nutrients which can either render us a little bit deficient or can aggravate the gut lining and cause a leaky gut situation to the point where then it becomes an inflammatory substance. So, for instance, if you were on a paleo diet, but you have autoimmunity, that would not be allowed on the paleo autoimmune protocol diet. And that's just because some of the substances within the nut family, let's say, are that harsh and not tolerated for the gut and the gut breakdown. And there's plenty of substances that have a lot of other different chemicals in it, which will allow me to segue into yet another big category of intolerances for some of us, and that is the nightshade family. Now, the nightshade family is a family of flowering plants, and of the food angle of the nightshade family, we're talking about the white potato, we're talking about the tomato, we're talking about the peppers, we're talking about paprika, and we're also talking about eggplant. Now, the nightshades have some chemistry in them called acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, and very small amounts might be tolerated, but larger amounts can actually render us toxic. And one way this is easy to explain is belladonna is actually within that category, and that is a catastrophic plant that can kill people even with small amounts of ingestion. Now, there are antidotes to get around that, of course, and there are actually medications that have been extracted or capitalized on the chemistry of the nightshade family. And I'll even go so far as to explain some of the migrant farmers that may be farming tomatoes and potatoes on a 8 to 12 hour basis per day actually have to get out of crop rotation and work on other facets of farming so that they are not touching and inhaling all of the nightshades on a chronic consistent basis. So if there are those of us who have autoimmune dysfunction, an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, it can be quite damaging to the system. There's another category of food issues that I like to tell people, and that is the histamine intolerance. So histamine is what is released when we are in the allergic phenomenon. So we have the B cells that secrete IgE, and IgE goes to the mast cell, and the mast cell secretes histamine. And histamine is what we all will realize as far as hives and itching and runny nose and congestion and scratchy eyes, coughing, and even to a degree asthma. So there are a lot of foods that are just wonderful as far as the nutrient-dense chemistry that they hold, but they are actually high in histamine, so that too much of those will give you the sensation that you are having an allergic reaction, because the trickle-down effect from the allergic reaction is the histamine release. So there are avocados, fermented foods, and the fermented alcohols, including the wine family, garlic and onion, and even to a degree the tomatoes that we were just talking about. So you may have great nutrient benefit from that food, but they release so much histamine, and if you are histamine intolerant, you will feel as though you are having an allergic reaction. So there are different ways that people like to go about evaluating what foods are tolerable. So you could see an allergist. You could go through some of the blood work that I mentioned at the beginning and some wonderful test panels. And some of those can be expensive. There are those who are great at applied kinesiology that can test these foods one-on-one to see if the body tolerates it before there's even an ingestion. And then there are those of us who are pretty good at food elimination diets, such that when you circulate a food out of the diet, do you improve with your symptoms? And let's say if you add it back in, do you create some of the symptoms? And of course, our symptoms can be many. They can be GI related, such as gas, bloating, heartburn, diarrhea, constipation, and some obvious gastric related complaints. But there are those of us who may notice brain fog or the sensation of our energy being poor, restlessness, agitation, skin-related manifestations, and a big one is actually inflammation and joint-related pains. So I would say that if you're having any of those symptoms, find somebody like me who's quite integrative and can help dive into it. Do not forget that food is considered our first medicine. It needs to be nutrient dense, but it can't go against your goals if the body is not tolerant of it. I would like for you to subscribe to my channel below. This is, again, Food as Thy First Medicine. I have a lot of tools in my tool bag to help you meet your goals as far as food, improving your human existence, and optimizing your human performance. So with that being said, until we meet again, be well.